She arrived at boot camp with a mix of excitement and fear. The air was thick with discipline and order, and the moment she stepped onto the grounds, she could feel the weight of what lay ahead. Everywhere she looked, there were recruits moving with precision, following instructions, their faces set with determination. She felt small and uncertain among them, but also determined to prove herself. This was her chance to show that she belonged, even if others might doubt her. Almost immediately, she noticed the stares. Some of the other recruits whispered behind her back, glancing at the tattoo that peeked out from under her uniform. It was a large design, bold and unusual, stretching across her back, and it drew attention she hadn't expected. She could hear snippets of laughter and murmurs as she walked past groups of recruits. Some of them smirked openly, making jokes about how a serious military environment wasn't a place for someone with such a tattoo. She felt a flush of embarrassment at first, but quickly reminded herself that she was here for more than their approval. Her first day was a whirlwind. They were introduced to strict routines, from early morning roll calls to intense physical training that pushed her body to limits she had never imagined. She struggled at first, her muscles aching, her mind racing to keep up with the pace. Every push-up, every sprint, every shouted order was a test of endurance and focus. Some of her fellow recruits seemed to handle it effortlessly, their movements precise and confident. She noticed how they glanced at her during exercises, some with judgment, others with curiosity. The whispers never fully stopped, but she tried to block them out, focusing instead on each instruction, each task, one at a time. Despite the mocking, she felt a quiet determination growing inside her. The tattoo that had drawn ridicule also reminded her of her personal journey, the challenges she had overcome before even stepping into boot camp. Each line and curve of the design held meaning, a story of resilience and courage. She started to see it not as a reason for others to judge her, but as a silent armor that gave her strength. The ridicule of her peers became background noise. Her focus shifted to proving herself through action rather than words. Even during the most exhausting exercises, she noticed small victories. Completing a long run without stopping, following an order precisely under the watchful eyes of instructors, finishing a task faster than expected. These moments gave her a sense of pride. Slowly, she began to feel a shift within herself. The fear and doubt that had gripped her on arrival began to transform into confidence. Each day, she was learning not just about physical endurance, but about mental strength and resilience. Her interactions with the other recruits were a mix of challenge and subtle lessons. Some continued to mock her, making jokes about her tattoo or questioning whether she could keep up. Others observed silently, perhaps impressed by her focus and persistence. She learned quickly that boot camp was not just about following orders. It was about observing, adapting, and standing firm under pressure. Every glance of judgment, every whispered insult, was a test of her inner strength. At night, after long hours of training and drills, she found herself reflecting on the day. Exhausted but determined, she thought about how far she had come already. Despite the mockery and the intimidating environment, she realized that the very thing that made her different, the tattoo, the uniqueness, the courage to face ridicule, could become a source of power. It was a reminder that she had survived challenges before and could survive whatever boot camp would throw at her. Even though she was just at the beginning, something inside her began to change. The ridicule of her peers no longer hurt her as much. Instead, it fueled her determination to succeed. She started to feel a sense of purpose, a feeling that this journey was bigger than their opinions. The first day, filled with stares, laughter, and tough exercises, ended with her feeling stronger than she had when she arrived. By the end of part one of her journey, she had learned an important lesson. Boot camp was not just a test of physical ability, but of courage, confidence, and resilience. The mocking she faced was only a small obstacle compared to the strength she was discovering within herself. Each step forward, each completed exercise, each ignored whisper of ridicule was building her into someone the boot camp, and eventually the world, could not easily dismiss. The days in boot camp quickly became a test of both body and mind. Each morning started before sunrise, with the shrill sound of the alarm ripping through the barracks. She would drag herself out of bed, muscles still sore from the previous day, and line up with the other recruits in crisp formation. The early hours were grueling, and the cold morning air made every breath feel sharp and heavy. Even as she tried to focus on the tasks at hand, the mocking whispers from some of her peers still lingered, and sometimes it felt harder to ignore them than to lift the weights or run the miles. The training itself was relentless. Every day, the instructors pushed them further than she thought possible. Running laps, carrying heavy equipment, crawling through mud, and climbing steep obstacles became the rhythm of her life. Every moment demanded total focus and determination. Yet despite her effort, there were times when she stumbled. Her legs ached, her hands were raw from rope climbs, and sometimes she couldn't finish a drill as quickly as others. In those moments, she felt the sting of humiliation more sharply because some recruits were quick to mock her mistakes, snickering or shaking their heads in disbelief. At first, she wanted to respond, to defend herself or explain, but she soon realized that arguing would accomplish nothing. Bootcamp was not a place for words, it was a place for action. She began to understand that silence and perseverance were her strongest weapons. Instead of responding to the mocking, she poured every ounce of energy she had into performing her duties, no matter how difficult or exhausting they were. She focused on mastering the exercises, learning the routines, and keeping pace with the others. Slowly, she began to notice small improvements. Where she once struggled, she now performed with a bit more confidence and control. Some of the recruits continued to ridicule her, using her tattoo as an excuse to mock her appearance or make her feel out of place. "She's all style, no skill," they whispered behind her back. Their laughter and jokes were meant to make her feel weak, to distract her from her goal. At first, she let it affect her, doubting whether she could actually survive the intense demands of bootcamp. But then she remembered why she had come in the first place. This was her chance to prove to herself that she could succeed, that she was more than the judgments of others. As the days went by, she learned to turn the mockery into motivation. Each insult or dismissive glance became fuel for her determination. When a peer laughed at her failing to complete an obstacle course quickly, she promised herself she would try harder next time. When someone whispered that her tattoo didn't belong in the military, she silently reminded herself of the courage and strength it symbolized. It wasn't just ink on her skin. It was a story of resilience, a reminder of challenges she had already overcome in her life. She began to see that her difference, which had once made her a target, could actually make her stronger. The physical challenges were only part of the battle. Mental strain was equally demanding. Long hours of drills, strict discipline, and constant observation by instructors tested her patience and focus. Mistakes were met with immediate correction, sometimes harshly, and failure could lead to public embarrassment. She had to keep her mind sharp and her emotions in check. Whenever the whispers of ridicule surfaced, she reminded herself that reacting emotionally would only give them power. Instead, she trained herself to stay calm, to focus on what she could control, and to let her performance speak for her. Despite the difficulties, she began to notice small victories. Completing a set of push-ups without faltering, following orders perfectly under pressure, or running longer distances without giving up gave her a quiet sense of pride. She also started learning from the instructors and observing the other recruits carefully, noticing patterns and techniques that helped her improve. Bootcamp was not just a test of strength. It was a test of learning, adaptation, and resilience. She realized that every moment of discomfort, every mocking word, and every exhausted step was shaping her into someone stronger than she had ever been. Her confidence grew slowly but steadily. By focusing on her own progress instead of the ridicule, she discovered a new inner strength. She began to command respect not through confrontation, but through her actions. The other recruits, who had once mocked her openly, started noticing her determination and skill. Some of the whispers turned into quiet curiosity, as people began to wonder how someone so small and different could endure so much. The shift was subtle, but it was happening. By the end of this stage in her journey, she had learned an essential truth. Bootcamp was as much about mental resilience as it was about physical endurance. The ridicule from others, the harsh exercises, and the constant pressure were all challenges meant to test her spirit. And she was discovering that she could meet those challenges head-on. What had started as a source of doubt, her tattoo, the laughter of peers, the intense demands of training, was gradually becoming the fuel that propelled her forward. She was no longer just a recruit. She was a fighter, ready to prove that strength, courage, and perseverance could silence even the harshest critics. Boot camp had begun to feel a little more familiar, though it was no less demanding. Each day was still long and grueling, but she noticed a shift within herself. Her body was getting stronger, her mind sharper, and for the first time, she began to sense that she might actually belong in this harsh environment. It was during this stage of training that she started to surprise not only herself but also the instructors and her peers. The turning point came during a particularly intense obstacle course. It was a challenge designed to test endurance, strength, and mental focus all at once. Recruits were expected to climb walls, crawl through mud, carry heavy equipment over long distances, and complete each section as quickly as possible. Many struggled, exhausted before reaching the halfway point. She too had doubts. Her muscles burned, and the ground seemed to stretch endlessly beneath her feet. But something inside her refused to give up. She remembered all the days of mockery and ridicule she had endured, and instead of letting it weaken her, she let it drive her forward. With each obstacle, she began to move with a rhythm that surprised even herself. She scaled walls with determination, crawled through mud without hesitation, and carried her gear steadily. Her focus was absolute, her movements precise. She was no longer concerned with what others thought. Every step was about proving to herself that she could do it. Her peers, some of whom had mocked her just weeks earlier, began to watch with quiet astonishment. Whispers spread through the ranks. She was moving faster and more efficiently than many who had been training far longer than she had. The instructors also took notice. They had seen many recruits struggle, some quit, and some falter under pressure. But her persistence, her calm under strain, and her ability to push through physical pain without complaint made her stand out. For the first time, an instructor approached her during a break and offered a rare nod of approval, a silent acknowledgement of her growing skill and resilience. It was small, but it meant the world to her. It was proof that she was no longer just another recruit to be judged by appearance. She was someone who could perform, someone who could excel. Even outside the obstacle courses, she began to show leadership in small ways. During group exercises, she learned how to coordinate with others, encourage teammates, and make quick decisions under pressure. Where before she might have hesitated, she now acted with confidence, trusting her instincts and the training she had received. She was learning the unspoken rules of boot camp. Courage and skill earned respect far more than words ever could. Her peers who had once mocked her were starting to notice the change. The whispers of ridicule grew quieter, replaced by surprised murmurs. Some of them began to glance at her with curiosity rather than judgment. She could sense the shift, but she didn't let it distract her. She had learned that respect could not be demanded, it had to be earned, and she intended to earn it through consistent performance. Mentally, she was also transforming. Boot camp was designed to break recruits down, to test their patience, resilience, and ability to function under stress. But instead of feeling broken, she felt herself being rebuilt. Each challenge, each physical strain, each moment of doubt became an opportunity to strengthen not just her body, but her mind. She began to understand that boot camp was as much about internal growth as it was about external performance. The whispers, the laughter, the initial judgments, they were all part of the challenge, and she was learning to rise above them. One moment stood out clearly. During a timed exercise, she was placed in a situation where she had to make a split-second decision while carrying heavy equipment across difficult terrain. The other recruits hesitated or made mistakes, costing them valuable seconds. She acted decisively, moving quickly yet carefully, completing the task efficiently. When the results were announced, she had not only completed the exercise successfully but had also finished among the top performers. The expressions on the faces of her peers and instructors spoke volumes: shock, respect, and a newfound acknowledgement of her capabilities. By the end of this phase of training, she had begun to realize something important about herself. Boot camp was no longer just a place of struggle and ridicule. It had become a proving ground where her perseverance, courage, and skill could shine. The very environment that had seemed hostile and intimidating was now a place where she could demonstrate her true strength. She understood that her journey was not about proving others wrong. It was about proving to herself that she was capable, that she belonged, and that nothing, not even mockery, could diminish her determination. Her growth did not go unnoticed. The instructor team began to subtly change their approach toward her, offering more challenging exercises and recognizing her potential. Some of the peers who had mocked her began to approach her quietly, seeking advice or watching how she managed to excel. She remained humble, knowing that true strength was shown through actions, not words, and that each day was an opportunity to grow even more. By the time part 3 of her journey ended, she had transformed from a cautious, ridiculed recruit into someone quietly commanding attention through skill and perseverance. She had learned that boot camp was not only a test of physical strength but also a crucible for mental resilience, courage, and self-belief. The ridicule she had faced in the beginning was no longer a burden. It was the spark that ignited her determination to succeed, to stand out, and to prepare for the even greater challenges that lay ahead. The day of the big field exercise arrived, and there was a tension in the air that made every recruit alert and uneasy. This exercise wasn't just another test. It was one of the most important assessments in boot camp. It would test everything they had learned: physical endurance, mental focus, teamwork, and decision-making under pressure. Recruits were paired and grouped in teams, each given challenging tasks that would push them to their limits. She knew this was her chance to show, not just to herself, but to everyone around her, what she was truly capable of. From the moment the exercise began, she felt her nerves, but they were accompanied by a calm determination she hadn't felt in the early days of boot camp. The course was long and grueling. There were obstacle walls to climb, streams to cross, and difficult terrain to navigate while carrying heavy gear. Each step tested her strength and endurance. As she moved through the challenges, she noticed the other recruits struggling with even the simplest tasks. Some faltered, lost their focus, or became frustrated. She, however, had learned to keep her mind steady, block out distractions, and focus on the task at hand. It was during a particularly difficult maneuver that the moment came which would change everything. She had to crawl under a low barbed wire section, carrying a heavy pack. As she moved forward, the fabric of her uniform shifted slightly, revealing the top edge of her back tattoo. It was large and intricate, a design she had always been proud of but which had drawn mockery when she first arrived. The tattoo wasn't just art. It was a symbol of her personal journey, of resilience, courage, and challenges she had faced before ever setting foot in boot camp. She had never expected it to be noticed during a field exercise, but it was, and the reaction was immediate. A commander had been observing the recruits, moving swiftly among the groups to assess performance. He had seen countless trainees, but the sight of her tattoo stopped him in his tracks. For a brief moment, he simply froze, his expression unreadable. The other recruits were too focused on the exercise to notice at first, but those who looked up caught the hint of surprise in his eyes. The mocking peers who had once whispered and laughed were suddenly silent. Even the instructors seemed to pause, sensing the unusual weight of the moment. She didn't understand immediately why the commander had reacted that way, but she felt a sudden awareness pass through her. There was something about the tattoo that seemed to command respect, even without explanation. In that instant, she realized that her difference, the very thing that had made her a target of ridicule, was now a source of power. The tattoo, the story it represented, and her own unshakable focus combined to create an aura of quiet authority she hadn't felt before. The rest of the exercise continued, but the dynamic had shifted. Recruits who had once doubted her now watched her with a mixture of curiosity and cautious respect. She moved with confidence, completing each task methodically and efficiently. The instructors noted her performance, and even the mocking peers could not deny her skill and determination. Each successful maneuver strengthened her confidence further. She had faced ridicule, exhaustion, and self-doubt before, But now she felt a surge of pride, knowing she was proving herself in ways words alone could never accomplish. Mentally, she began to understand something profound. Bootcamp wasn't just about physical strength, it was about character, resilience, and presence. Her tattoo, once a source of judgment, had become a symbol of her journey and inner strength. The commander's frozen reaction was a subtle but unmistakable acknowledgement that she was more than just a recruit. She was someone with history, courage, and determination that commanded attention without needing to say a word. For the first time, she felt a deep sense of acceptance within the environment. Not everyone understood or respected her, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had earned a moment of recognition from someone with authority, someone who had the power to see beyond appearances and understand the strength she carried. She realized that the very things that had made her feel out of place could also make her unforgettable. By the end of the exercise, she had completed every challenge with skill and precision. Her peers, who had mocked her in the past, now watched her with quiet admiration. The instructors noted her performance in their records, and the commander's reaction lingered in her mind as a reminder that strength could be both visible and invisible, sometimes hidden in action, sometimes symbolized in something as simple as a tattoo. That day became a turning point in her bootcamp journey. She had faced not just physical obstacles, but the judgment and doubt of those around her. She had turned ridicule into motivation, self-doubt into focus, and difference into power. The tattoo on her back, which had been a source of embarrassment for a time, was now a mark of identity and resilience, silently commanding respect from those who had once mocked her. By the time she returned to the barracks, she felt a quiet triumph. She had proven something vital not just to the commander or her peers but to herself. She was capable, strong, and deserving of respect. The mockery and laughter that had once defined her first days at boot camp were fading memories, replaced by a growing confidence that she would carry forward, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead with courage and determination. After the unforgettable field exercise, life at boot camp began to feel different for her. The whispers and laughter that had followed her since day one were no longer as loud or frequent. Some of the recruits who had mocked her seemed quieter, observing her instead of sneering. There was a change in the atmosphere, subtle but undeniable. She could feel that people were beginning to see her differently, not just as the recruit with the bold tattoo, but as someone who could hold her own, who had proven her skill and determination in a way that couldn't be ignored. The mysterious reaction of the commander during the exercise had left a lasting impression on everyone. No one openly spoke about it, but it was clear that the moment had shifted the way both the instructors and recruits viewed her. Where once she had been dismissed or laughed at, now there was a sense of cautious respect. She noticed some recruits glancing at her when they thought she wasn't looking, their expressions a mix of curiosity, awe, and maybe even a little envy. It was strange to think that something as simple as a tattoo could carry so much weight. But in the world of boot camp, symbols mattered, and her tattoo had silently spoken volumes about her strength and resilience. Despite the growing respect, she didn't let it make her complacent. Boot camp was still grueling, and every day presented new physical and mental challenges. From long-distance runs to grueling obstacle courses, the instructors continued to push her to the edge. But now, with the subtle recognition she had earned, she felt more confident. She moved with a quiet authority, performing each task with precision and determination. Her focus never wavered, and her mind had learned to tune out distractions. The whispers, the judgmental stares, and even the occasional mocking glance from those still unwilling to accept her. As she continued to excel, the other recruits began to speculate about her past. There were quiet murmurs in the barracks. "Who is she really?" some would whisper. "Where did she get that tattoo?" Others wondered if there was a story behind it that none of them could guess. The mockery had not disappeared entirely, but it had changed form. Instead of open ridicule, there were now hushed tones of curiosity. She didn't answer questions or explain her tattoo, letting it remain a mystery. She understood that sometimes, the unknown could command more respect than words ever could. During group exercises, she began to notice subtle changes in behavior. Some of the recruits who had once doubted her now followed her lead, even unconsciously. When she moved through a task with efficiency, others adjusted their pace to match hers. When she demonstrated focus under pressure, her peers mirrored her calmness. She hadn't asked for leadership, but it had come naturally, simply because she had earned it through action, not words. Respect, she realized, could not be demanded. It could only be achieved through consistent effort, courage, and skill. Mentally, she was growing stronger every day. Bootcamp was as much a test of character as it was of physical ability, and she had begun to understand that fully. The challenges, the harsh discipline, and even the ridicule had all been shaping her into someone resilient. She had learned to trust herself, to rely on her inner strength, and to focus on what she could control rather than worrying about the opinions of others. Each day brought new lessons in patience, perseverance, and the quiet power of self-belief. The instructors noticed her growth as well. They began to give her more challenging tasks, not because they were trying to punish her, but because they recognized her potential. They saw that she could handle pressure, make quick decisions, and perform at a high level even under extreme fatigue. The moments of recognition, small though they were, encouraged her to push even harder. She realized that success in bootcamp wasn't just about completing exercises. It was about demonstrating composure, intelligence, and determination under pressure. Even with the growing respect, she never let herself forget the early days of ridicule. She remembered the mocking peers, the stares, and the whispers. Instead of letting resentment take root, she turned those memories into fuel. Every time she felt tired or doubted herself, she reminded herself of how far she had come. The laughter that once embarrassed her was now a distant echo, replaced by quiet confidence and a growing sense of purpose. She was learning that true strength was not about dominating others, it was about mastering oneself. By this stage of bootcamp, her presence had begun to have a subtle but undeniable impact on the environment. The other recruits, who had once seen her as an easy target for ridicule, now treated her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Even those who remained skeptical were forced to acknowledge her ability to endure, perform, and lead through example. The silent recognition she received from both instructors and peers was a powerful reminder that she had transformed her perceived weaknesses into strengths, her differences into assets, and her ridicule into motivation. By the end of this phase, she had become more than just a recruit. She was someone who had turned mockery into respect, judgment into curiosity, and obstacles into stepping stones. Her journey in bootcamp was no longer just about surviving. It was about shaping herself into a person of resilience, courage, and quiet authority. The whispers of the past were fading, replaced by a growing awareness among her peers that she was someone who could not be underestimated. She understood now that the real test was not in the physical challenges alone, but in maintaining strength of character, focus, and confidence, even when others doubted her. As bootcamp progressed, her confidence and skill continued to grow. The challenges she faced each day were harder than before, but she had learned how to manage her fear, exhaustion, and the pressure of constant scrutiny. What once felt overwhelming now seemed like an opportunity to prove herself. Each task, each exercise, was a chance to show that she was more than just the recruit with the tattoo. She was someone who could perform, lead, and endure. During team exercises, she began to notice how differently the other recruits treated her. Some of the same people who had once mocked her now watched her closely, silently taking cues from her movements and decisions. They saw how she handled obstacles efficiently, how she communicated clearly under pressure, and how she maintained calm even when the tasks became physically exhausting or mentally challenging. Her actions spoke louder than any words could, and gradually, respect began to replace the earlier ridicule. She excelled not because she wanted to prove others wrong, but because she wanted to challenge herself. Every obstacle she climbed, every long run she completed, every drill she executed perfectly gave her a quiet sense of accomplishment. There were moments when her muscles ached, when her body screamed for rest, and when the mental strain felt unbearable. Yet, she pushed through, reminding herself that perseverance was stronger than temporary discomfort. The earlier whispers of mockery had become background noise, fading in importance as her self-belief grew stronger. One particular day stood out as a defining moment in her journey. The instructors had set up a series of difficult exercises that required both physical strength and quick thinking. Recruits were expected to work as teams, but also show individual skill and initiative. While others hesitated or faltered under the pressure, she moved decisively, completing each challenge with precision and confidence. She carried heavy equipment across rough terrain, navigated obstacles that had defeated many before her, and executed commands with a sharp focus that made the instructors take notice. Her peers, who had once doubted her, could not help but be impressed. The commander, who had once frozen at the sight of her tattoo, was present that day to observe the exercise. As he watched, he noticed her skill and determination. It was clear that she had grown significantly since the early days of boot camp. The silent recognition from someone in authority felt powerful, not because it was public acknowledgement, but because it confirmed what she had already begun to believe, that she was capable, resilient, and deserving of respect. Her peers also began to change their behavior. Some approached her quietly for advice on how to manage the more difficult tasks. Others watched and learned from the way she handled pressure and made quick decisions. Even those who remained skeptical could not deny that she was a strong and capable recruit. She didn't flaunt her abilities or demand recognition. Instead, she let her actions speak for themselves. Respect, she had learned, was earned through consistent performance, not words or appearances. The tattoo that had once made her a target for ridicule now seemed to serve as a symbol of her resilience and determination. Every time it was visible during exercises, it reminded her, and those around her, of the journey she had undertaken. The mark on her back was more than just ink. It was a story of perseverance, courage, and self-belief. It had once been a reason for mockery, but now it silently commanded attention, reinforcing the respect she had begun to earn. Mentally, she had grown stronger than she ever imagined possible. Boot camp had taught her that challenges were not obstacles meant to defeat her, but opportunities to discover her inner strength. The ridicule, the pressure, and the exhaustion had all been part of a process to test her character and determination. And she had passed every test, not by seeking approval, but by trusting herself and refusing to give up. By this point in her journey, she had begun to notice subtle ways in which she influenced the environment around her. Her calm under pressure inspired others to remain focused. Her efficiency and skill set a standard that others aspired to follow. She realized that leadership wasn't about authority or position. It was about the way one carried themselves, the confidence one displayed, and the ability to remain steady in challenging circumstances. She also began to reflect on how far she had come. The first days of boot camp had been filled with doubt, ridicule, and uncertainty. Now, she moved with quiet confidence, respected by instructors and peers alike. The transformation was not just physical. It was mental and emotional. She had turned every mocking word, every skeptical glance, and every difficult challenge into motivation to grow stronger. By the end of this stage, she had solidified her position as someone who could not be underestimated. Her perseverance, skill, and calmness under pressure had earned her respect and recognition, and she had begun to influence those around her in ways she had never expected. She had learned that true excellence was not about defeating others, but about mastering oneself and consistently rising to meet every challenge with courage and determination. Boot camp was no longer simply a place of trial and struggle. It had become a stage where she could demonstrate her strength, earn respect, and show that perseverance, skill, and inner strength could overcome even the harshest ridicule and doubt. She was ready for the next phase of her journey, stronger, more confident, and determined to continue proving herself in ways that went beyond appearances or words. By now, she had become a familiar presence at boot camp, not because of her tattoo, not because of the whispers that had once followed her, but because of her consistent skill, determination, and calm under pressure. She had proven herself time and again, and the attitude of her peers had shifted. The mocking laughter that had once made her stomach twist with discomfort was replaced by quiet curiosity and, increasingly, admiration. People had begun to realize that she was not just surviving boot camp, she was excelling. One day, a special inspection was announced. The commander, known for his strict standards and keen eye, would personally observe the recruits during a series of drills and exercises. This was an important moment for everyone, a chance to demonstrate their progress and dedication. She approached the day with her usual focus, knowing that her performance mattered more than appearances or past judgments. Each movement, each command executed, was an opportunity to show what she had learned and how far she had come. As the exercises began, she moved with precision and confidence. She anticipated the challenges, adjusted quickly to changing situations, and completed tasks efficiently, even when others struggled. Her physical skill was evident, but it was her mental composure that truly set her apart. She remained calm under pressure, made decisions quickly, and executed them flawlessly. This combination of skill and composure began to draw attention not just from the instructors, but from the commander himself. At one point during the inspection, she found herself in a position that required quick thinking and decisive action. A team challenge had hit a snag, and many recruits were unsure how to proceed. She stepped forward calmly, assessing the situation, guiding her teammates, and taking the lead without hesitation. The other recruits followed her direction instinctively, surprised by the quiet authority she displayed. Even those who had once mocked her seemed to watch in awe as she handled the challenge with skill and grace. It was during this moment of calm and competence that the commander's eyes fell on her. For a few seconds, he paused, clearly impressed by the combination of skill, focus, and quiet confidence she exhibited. His gaze lingered on her, and in that instant, she felt the weight of recognition. This was not a casual acknowledgement. It was a moment of understanding that she had transformed herself through perseverance, determination, and inner strength. The tattoo that had once drawn ridicule had long since become irrelevant in comparison to what she had achieved, but it had been part of the journey that shaped her. By the end of the inspection, the commander addressed the recruits. While he did not single anyone out publicly, his demeanor and the subtle nods he gave during the exercises made it clear who had stood out. Her performance had earned silent but undeniable recognition, a moment of acknowledgement that resonated deeply. Among her peers, whispers began to circulate, this time filled with respect rather than mockery. People were beginning to understand that she was someone who had earned her place through action, not words. The shift in her peers' attitudes became more noticeable in the days that followed. Those who had once doubted her began to approach her for advice, quietly asking questions about her techniques and how she handled the most challenging tasks. Others watched her more closely during exercises, trying to learn from her example. She did not boast or draw attention to herself. She let her performance and attitude speak for her. Leadership, she realized, was not about commanding others. It was about inspiring respect and trust through consistent action. Mentally and emotionally, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had overcome ridicule, doubt, and the pressure of boot camp to reach a point where her peers and instructors recognized her capabilities. The journey had not been easy, but every challenge, every whispered insult, and every moment of uncertainty had contributed to the strength she now displayed. She understood that her true achievement was not just excelling in exercises, but in transforming how others perceived her and, more importantly, how she perceived herself. Her confidence grew not from external praise, but from the knowledge that she had worked tirelessly and refused to let anyone else define her worth. The experiences she had endured, the mockery, the grueling physical demands, the mental strain, had all shaped her into someone resilient, capable, and respected. She had learned that respect was not given lightly. It was earned through consistency, skill, and courage, and she had earned it in full. By this stage, she had become a quiet role model at boot camp. New recruits noticed her dedication and calm under pressure. Peers who had once mocked her now observed her carefully, trying to emulate her focus and determination. Even instructors who had been skeptical initially acknowledged her growth, offering subtle encouragement and challenging her further because they recognized her potential. She was no longer defined by her appearance or her tattoo, but by her actions, her perseverance, and the strength she had shown throughout the journey. By the end of this phase, it was clear that she had transformed entirely. The ridicule of the past was no longer relevant. It had been replaced by respect earned through excellence and resilience. Her journey had reached a point where she was no longer just a recruit. She was a symbol of perseverance and determination. The commander's frozen reaction at the sight of her tattoo long ago had been a glimpse of the respect she was destined to earn fully, and now it had become a reality. She had not only survived boot camp, but she had thrived, earning recognition, trust, and admiration through her unwavering courage and skill. By the time she reached the final phase of boot camp, she had changed completely, not just in skill and confidence, but in the way she viewed herself and the world around her. The girl who had once been laughed at, whispered about, and judged by her peers was now someone who commanded quiet respect. She moved through the training grounds with calm assurance, aware that her presence alone carried weight. She had learned lessons that went far beyond physical endurance, lessons about resilience, courage, and the quiet power of persistence. The final exercises were the most difficult yet. They tested everything she had learned over the past weeks: strength, strategy, teamwork, and mental focus. The instructors designed them to push recruits to their absolute limits, and every mistake could cost valuable points or recognition. Many recruits struggled under the intense pressure, their movements faltering, their focus breaking. She, however, had grown used to the challenge. She relied on every lesson she had learned: patience, observation, mental clarity, and the ability to keep calm even when everything around her seemed chaotic. During one particular exercise, a simulated combat scenario, she found herself in a situation that demanded both leadership and precise execution. Her team was under pressure, and confusion began to spread among some of the recruits. She stepped forward without hesitation, quickly assessing the situation and directing her teammates with quiet authority. Her instructions were clear, and her confidence was contagious. Even those who had once doubted her followed her lead instinctively. She realized in that moment that her journey had not just been about personal survival. It had been about inspiring those around her, earning trust through skill, and leading by example. The commander, who had once frozen at the sight of her back tattoo, was present during this exercise. As he watched, he saw the transformation in her. How she handled pressure, how she commanded respect without demanding it, and how she had turned what others had once mocked into her source of strength. He had seen many recruits over the years, but very few displayed the combination of resilience, composure, and skill that she now demonstrated. The silent acknowledgement in his eyes was unmistakable. She had earned his respect, and she had proven herself in a way that words alone could never convey. Her peers also witnessed her performance, and the shift in their perception was undeniable. The recruits who had once laughed or whispered about her tattoo were now silent, some in awe, others quietly reflecting on their own efforts. Those who had doubted her abilities began to treat her as an equal, and some even looked to her for guidance. The journey from ridicule to respect was complete. She had shown that strength, courage, and perseverance could change not only how others saw her, but how she saw herself. Mentally, she felt a profound sense of achievement. Bootcamp had tested her in every way possible, breaking her down only to build her stronger. She had faced ridicule, exhaustion, and uncertainty, and had turned each challenge into an opportunity to grow. The tattoo that had once been a source of mockery was now a symbol of her resilience and determination, a silent reminder of the journey she had undertaken and the strength she had discovered within herself. As graduation day approached, she reflected on how far she had come. The nervous, self-conscious girl who had arrived at boot camp was no longer the same person. She had endured, persevered, and excelled. Every obstacle, every comment, every challenge had contributed to the strength she now carried. She understood that the journey had not just been about physical ability, but about cultivating courage, self-discipline, and unwavering determination. She had learned that respect and recognition were earned through consistent effort, skill, and character. The day of graduation brought with it a mix of pride, relief, and quiet triumph. She stood among her fellow recruits, listening as the instructors and commander addressed the group. There was a sense of accomplishment in the air, a recognition that each recruit had grown, learned, and transformed. But for her, the moment carried a deeper significance. She had faced ridicule, overcome doubt, and proven herself in a way that no one could ignore. Her journey had come full circle. As she received her recognition and completed the final ceremonies, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The mockery that had once followed her seemed like a distant memory, replaced by respect, trust, and admiration. She realized that her story was not just about surviving boot camp. It was about transforming challenges into strength, using adversity as motivation, and turning doubt into determination. Her tattoo, once a target for judgment, had become a quiet emblem of her courage, a reminder of how far she had come and what she had overcome. Looking back, she understood that boot camp had taught her far more than physical skills. It had taught her resilience, mental toughness, and the value of persistence. It had shown her that true strength was not measured by the absence of challenges, but by the ability to face them with courage and determination. She had discovered that respect could be earned through action, that leadership was demonstrated through composure and example, and that personal growth often came from the most difficult and unexpected experiences. By the end of her journey, she had transformed completely. The girl who had been mocked and underestimated was now someone who inspired respect, commanded attention through her actions, and carried herself with quiet confidence. She had proven to herself, her peers, and her commanders that strength, perseverance, and courage could overcome even the harshest ridicule. Boot camp had tested her in every way possible, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to face the challenges of the world beyond, carrying the lessons she had learned and the strength she had discovered within herself.